Afternoon, Sunday morning.
Pretty good, my friend. Pretty good.
Good, good. Well, hey, we're talking about AI for humans, and I guess this whole agentic thing. Have you noticed that agents seem to be catching on?
Oh,
Uh,
I think it's a right now. I mean, hey, you did a whole session on it at that conference a few weeks ago. But yeah, no, I've seen it catching on, and a lot more even on LinkedIn. A lot of posts about it too.
yeah, so it's interesting when I think about agents. Um, I guess some people might think an agent is a sports agent when we think about the word agent. Some people might think it's a laundry detergent. It's a
Mhm.
cleaning agent. Could be one of those. But what makes an agent different from a chatbot? Ken, what's kind of the top two or three or maybe four things that make that a true
Well,
statement?
I think the most important thing is that an agent can take action on its own. Though, so like a chatbot, you have to talk to the chatbot, you get answers back and forth, and an agent can act like that as well. So it has some similarities. But the biggest thing is that it can take action on its own. The other thing too is that agents develop identity or can have identity, and part of that is inherited from the person or the entity that they're taking action on behalf of. So that could be an agent for a company. Let's say it's an agent that's doing doing sales activity. It could even be an agent that reaches out and calls people on behalf of the company. But it can also be one that tries to schedule trips or who knows what kind of things. But it has agency or it's got a purpose, and it inherits a lot of that from who created it, whether it's an individual or a company.
Right. And so it's interesting because we have kind of this escalation of agents. We have code that you and I have been working together for 30 years now, writing code that does stuff. Typically, we've worked on kind of cloud on mass scale solutions with millions or tens of millions or billions of users.
Mm.
And then we have a chatbot. So a chatbot is really what a a way to answer some preset kinds of questions, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Preset, trained usually on a narrow scope, and it's a little smarter than a search engine, but not much really.
Well, and sometimes I've been working with some different companies, and of course, the words that we're using here are just Ken and Bob talking about AI for humans. They don't represent our companies or a point of view with them. Just we're just friends talking about something that we think is pretty important for
Mhm.
folks. Um, so an agent has the ability to have some executive function, so it can do some things. And you mentioned, booking flights for you. Um,
Mhm.
so what's important also about agents is maybe that it should have some limits on what it can do. Probably be
Mhm.
pretty important. You can't, maybe you wanted a coach flight to Biloxi, and you
Mhm.
ended up getting a first class flight to Paris, which is okay, but it's probably going to
Mhm.
cost a little bit more. What are some other things you think about with agents that are important um, as we try to help 9 billion people kind of wrap their heads around this? So,
Well, you got to realize that agents are built on uh, large language model AI. And so you have to be concerned about things like we do with all of these model drift. I was even reading about identity drift or purpose drift. So you might have designed it to, book coach flights for you, but maybe you one time book a first class flight. And so now it thinks that's what you want to do all the time. It can also be manipulated into changing its purpose. So you've got to think about outside actors. And then there's in general with agents, you want to think about transparency, transparency to the other agent interacting with it or the human. Like if you're being called by an agent, oh, and this has happened to me. I was contacted on LinkedIn, and it took me 4 iterations of responding to somebody before I realized this is an agent that's just doing circular logic trying to get me into a conversation, and was probably a phishing agent trying to get me to divulge information. So there was not transparency in that moment that I was interacting with an agent, and you need to have that as an aspect. So you've got a lot of those same kinds of things you want to think about in terms of AI when you think about an agent built upon AI.
yeah, and I had an experience. I bought a lawnmower, a robotic lawnmower, which I really enjoy.
You have one of those? I
Uh,
want one. Go ahead.
It's a company, a Chinese company. I won't mention the name. I'll tell you privately, but I really like the. In fact, I might even do a whole mower segment on AI for humans because it is, in fact, because of AI that we can get the vision and other kind of fuzzy logic that makes it work. But
Mhm,
the cable that they sent me that connects between
mhm,
my power station and the lower end, so the a specific kind of unlicensed radio spectrum, so a little satellite
mhm,
thing, so I don't have to pay for a GPS or a 3G connection. It broke. Pretty simple. So I assume, by the way, since I bought it a couple months ago and it cost me about, I don't know, $1,000, that maybe a cable should last more than 2 months. Okay. So I went and I connected with the chat bot as I had kind of expected. And what I realized is that I had been escalated to 3 different levels of chat bots. And it told me I was talking to humans, but I was still just talking to chat bots.
Whoa.
Okay. And so I used some words and I did some escalation stuff about social media and warranty and complaints on Amazon and other things. And I eventually got a human to call me from Europe. And they're like, "Oh, we really want to help you." And by the way, it's 17 days and counting. By the way, because I know some really smarter people than me, I fashioned a cable myself, which I haven't
Hmm,
done since probably the 90s. Good
hmm,
old Redmond cable. Remember the days in the data centers? So I fashioned a cable to fix the problem, but I'm still waiting for their answer. And not telling me it's a human when it isn't seems like kind of a bad thing. So hey, since it's Sunday and you and I both have family stuff we're doing, I used a couple of AI tools to
mhm.
represent some better thinking than mine on this, to kind of summarize kind of the 4 things I think that might be useful. So you mind if I share that with the folks here?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I've also checked with an AI, but I want to see what yours came up with.
Yeah. So, um, can you see that right now in my?
Mhm.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and present that in Gamma. Become one of my favorite tools. And you know that I have a view of tools, cools, rules, and schools. So, what are the things that we can use? Why are they cool? What should we be worried about? And what school should we go to if we need to go to school? And so, I'm going to go ahead and say um, agents that work need to be just as good as any code that you and I have ever worked on together. So, you've got to do all the things. And remember that AI is garbage in, garbage out. So, if you're good at something, you can probably be better with generative AI. If you're bad at something, you can probably be worser, right? So the
Mhm.
first thing is build the prompt infrastructure, and really build essentially a system prompt so that talks about what the agent does, what are the rules, what they can or can't do. Think about decisions. What decisions can you make? Like you can recommend maybe certain travel or itineraries for me, but you can't actually book a flight without my permission, right?
Mhm.
And by the way, I stole this from one of the presenters that we did at the event a few weeks ago. That was a great event. Was that TechWell that we were speaking with, the AI
And it was
conference? Yeah.
TechWell's AICon USA. Very good event.
Version. I thought it was one of our afternoon keynoters. I think on the second day talked about version everything. Because remember, we may call it prompts, but it's really prompts that are generating code, and then
Mhm.
give examples that tell you, this is the kind of thing I want you to do. So that's kind of the tools piece. The second is ask your customers how they're feeling, right? Who are your personas? What's the context? Is it reliable? Always assume for the edge case, right? Chaos Monkey, Sue and the team over at Netflix are pretty awesome when it comes to Chaos Monkey kind of stuff.
Mhm.
What are the rules? By the way, that's the most important thing with agents. Don't give a virus a credit card, right? So just remember that you should know exactly what this agent can do. And think about this as a hiring scenario. I'm hiring you for a job or a set of jobs. I've got a job description. I have performance reviews. I have measures and metrics. I also have confidence thresholds. Go use your tools and see how they're working and have groups of alpha customers use them. Understand how failure mode works. And failure mode often should be, as we think in the automotive industry, pull over to the side of the road, right? Don't just continue digging a bigger hole. Stop, right?
Mhm.
and create transparent limitations. So we know that we can trust it because we can understand how it got to the decision. By the way, you'll see in Perplexity, hey, here's how I got to the answer, right?
Yep.
So show me your thinking, show me what you did. And then over time, you're getting smarter. Your tool is going to get deployed. There's going to be humans in the loop. There's going to be metrics that matter. There's going to be a learning curve. But don't do performative demos, right? Build a teammate, not a demo, right? We want something that actually gets work done instead of something that you showed to the executive team because you could do it quickly. Remember, fast does not mean good. Fast just means fast. Right?
Yeah.
So what do you think about that? I mean, by the way, I cranked these out with a couple of tools and I've been thinking about it a lot, but I'm not sure. Did that cover the major stuff or are there other things we should think about?
No, I think that's a great framework for thinking about building agents. I really like it. I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you talked about version everything, including your prompts. That's one thing that a lot of people have been forgetting about as they go forward. And even I, you know, forget that sometimes as I'm going along using AIs on a daily basis. I mean, I hardly start my day without using AI for something. It's just now part of what I do. I do think maybe you and I can get together in the future and talk maybe some more about how security is different in an agentic world, how we want to think about that. And we can drift even more into like transparency. There's a lot of layers. You touched on it, but there's a lot of layers around transparency to think about that gets more complicated, especially with agent-driven AI. And so
Right.
you covered it, but we could spend a whole cast on that topic alone.
I think so. And I call it Agents Gone Wild. You might remember Girls Gone Wild, you know, the sort of spring break.
I don't remember that.
Well, and I've actually noticed a few interactions. Some things I've noticed, I work with different security teams across friends in the industry, lots of different companies. So there are things that we should probably talk about more. There are agents now that are calling agents, right? So there are phone calls that occur inbound with some major mobile operators where an agent is impersonating a clone voice and a user and doing some interesting hacking. So imagine if you're calling, say, Verizon, who's my carrier, and Verizon gives me all the prompts and the voice and other stuff, but it's a bad actor. And I don't mean Ronald Reagan here in the Monkey movie. I mean an actual bad actor. Right.
Speaking of voice, I was just interacting with ChatGPT as I was driving today. And it actually is putting pauses in, and one time giggled at its own turn of phrase while it was talking to me, giving me answers back. And I'm like, this is getting too human. It's actually bothering me.
Well, some things we'll talk about in the next, and again, this is an infrequent thing we're doing together just because we're friends. We like talking about, AI for humans. How do we interact? How do we help 9 billion people get a bit gooder? And also, how do we prevent some of the horror stories that we've seen? One of the things that I'm noticing is there's a lot of trials and proof of concepts. There's not very much production. And the reason for that is that people forget. And I'll give you an example. I've got a friend whose wife just had a stroke. He's a friend of mine in town. I am not an expert on stroke rehabilitation, but I'm working with some other volunteers to help build a flashcard application to help his wife work on her recovery. Okay. By the way, but remember, no good deed goes unpunished, because I don't know how to help people recover from a stroke, but the AI tools I use make it look like I do. So remember that everything we know about great engineering, and I often add things to my prompts, Ken, like you and I have tried this, use AWS well architected, use NIST, think of ISO 9000, think of all the standards, think of two-factor auth, encrypt everything at rest and in motion. I mean, all the things we know become maybe the prepend of really good infrastructure architecture for thinking about how an agent can be born. In fact, there's a phrase in here that I really like, which is build the brain before you show the face. Right? Don't show me an agent that looks sort of like it's useful when you haven't really built the intelligence and wired the synapses and come up to how decisions are made, because I don't need another pretty face. I mean, look at these two faces. This is a pretty good looking podcast. We're the best two people on it, by the way.
Yeah. Definitely the best looking people on this podcast.
Well, hey, Ken, let's keep the conversation going. I really like the work that I see you're doing across automotive and other places. I wonder how we can make AI really beneficial for humans. And I'm going to bring some other folks on. We met a wonderful dude from Nepal
Yeah.
who came to Costa Rica on a scholarship. He went to the University of Oklahoma. He's now doing some really cool computer science stuff, and he's probably a couple generations younger than us, at least like a generation and a half, and he'll probably have some ideas about how to build agents. So maybe we can invite other friends to the podcast soon. Does that sound good?
Sounds good. Looking
All
forward
right.
to it.
Thanks, my friend. Take care.
Thanks. Cheers.